Hello, guys. So we're going to read the story Apples to Oregon today. Remember, it's a tall tale, so the story is exaggerated and the things that happen couldn't actually happen. Our story has a larger than life hero who does some pretty amazing things that are unbelievable because you can't believe them. They didn't actually happen. All right. So our genre tall tale. This is Apples. Apple's name. Apple is her name. Remember, our essential question this week is what are some reasons people move west? We're going to read about this family's journey west with fruit. All right. Apples to Oregon being the slightly, just a little bit, true narrative of how a brave pioneer father brought apples, peaches, pears, plums, grapes, and cherries and children across the plains. By Deborah Hopkinson, illustrated by Nancy Carpenter. My daddy loved growing apples, and when he got ready to pull up roots and leave Iowa for Oregon, he couldn't bear to leave his apple trees behind. So the family was going to move. That's what pull up roots means. They're going to move, and they're moving from Iowa to Oregon. He doesn't want to leave his apple trees. He wants to take them with him. So Daddy built two of the biggest boxes you could ever hope to see. He set them into a sturdy wagon and shoveled in good wormy dirt. Then he filled every inch with little plants and trees, hundreds of them. Daddy was ready for the most daring adventure in the history of fruit. Apples whole, he cried. Along with apples, my daddy took peaches, pears, plums, grapes, and cherries. Oh, and by the way, he took us along too. We all had lots to do on the journey. Each morning, I helped Mama bake biscuits, while Daddy prepared for another long day on the trail. At night, Mama and I tucked in the little ones meaning the young children. Then Daddy fiddled lullabies under the stars. A lullaby is a song that you sing to someone to make them sleep, and Daddy would play on his fiddle. Fiddle is like a violin. Why, I can still hear him crooning to the Gravensteins. Crooning is to sing. Hush, little babies, don't you cry. Mama's gonna bake you in an apple pie. If that apple pie ain't sweet, Daddy's gonna munch you for his own special treat. That's the song he would sing to the little ones. We rolled along just fine till we came to the Platte River. It was wider than Texas, thicker than Mama's muskrat stew, and muddier than a cowboy's toenails. Okay, not really wider than Texas, not thicker than the stew, and not muddier than a cowboy's toenails. This is just a way of exaggerating to make it interesting to read what the river looked like. Just looking at it made my inside shrivel. When she would look at the river, her stomach would kind of squeeze together and feel like it was getting smaller. The riverbank was crowded with folks in prairie schooners trying to get up the nerve to cross. Lots of people were waiting to cross the river. When they saw us and all our little fruit trees fluttering in the breeze, they burst out laughing. Those leaves will be brown as dirt before you hit the plains, declared one old geezer. An old geezer's an old person. Plains, scoffed someone else. They laughed and made fun. That nursery wagon won't make it halfway across the river. So he laughed and said, the plains? You think they're going to make it all the way to the plains? They're not even going to be able to cross this river. But Daddy didn't let their talk worry him. He just looked me square in the eyes and said, delicious, I'm going to need your help. Right then and there, we built a raft for his tiny trees. Then Daddy loaded me and my little sisters and brothers onto the edges. So he put the wagon with all the fruit trees and the children onto the raft. See the raft they made? Now make sure my precious plants don't topple into the water, Daddy warned. Topple means to fall over. Well, we hadn't gone far when that muddy drink started to pull us down. The muddy drink being the river. The peaches are plummeting, my sisters shouted. The plums are plunging, boomed my brothers. Plunging, remember plunging is diving deep into the water. Don't let my babies go belly up, howled Daddy. Belly up means to die. I had to think quick. We're too heavy. If we don't go faster, we'll sink. We got to take off our shoes and kick. And so we kicked. Of course, we'd all been raised on apples. And everyone knows youngins, children, raised on apples are strong, mighty strong. Before we could say Johnny Appleseed, we kicked ourselves clear to the other shore. But no sooner had we got every last tree loaded back in the wagon than I spied a foul-looking bunch of clouds stomping round the sun just fit to be tied. The wind began to throw around everything that wasn't lashed down. Our boots, baby Albert's diapers, every pot and pan Mama had, even our own little wagon. Next, hailstones. Hailstones are big pieces of ice. Big as plums came hurling out of the sky. Guard the grapes, protect the peaches, Daddy howled. And so we all started tearing off our clothes and holding them over Daddy's darlings. Bonnets, petticoats, trousers, hats, even Daddy's drawers. That means Daddy's underpants. Phew! At last the storm passed, and Daddy's dainties were safe. After all the excitement, it felt good to hit the trail again. But before long, we came to an endless sandy desert. Now remember, us youngins didn't have our wagon or our boots. In no time, our feet were redder than the poison apple that the witch gave to Snow White. You know, the apple that Snow White eats from the witch in the story of Snow White? Their feet were redder than the apple. Delicious, this is our toughest challenge, said Daddy, wiping his brow as I followed him on tippy toes. We got to find a water hole or my babies are done for. If they don't find water for the plants, they're going to dry up. Sure enough, by noon, the fruit trees began to droop. They started to bend down slightly. By three, their itty-bitty tender leaves were getting crispy. They were dry from the sun. By nightfall, Daddy was crying. A handful of dead branches pressed against his heart. He was crying for the tree branches that died. I couldn't bear to see my daddy suffer. So early next morning, I took off to look for water. But although I searched and searched, I couldn't even find a splash or a puddle. After a while, I got so tuckered out, I plopped down under an old sagebrush. She was exhausted. Ouch, what is going on? Ouch, I yelled, landing on something hard. But when I saw what it was, I whooped for joy. My very own boot. What's more, it still had some water in it from all those melted hailstones. Remember the balls of ice? They melted inside the shoe and there was water. That was our lucky day, let me tell you. We found every one of Mama's pots and pans spread out across the land. They all had a few drops of water in them too, just enough to get Daddy's trees into the next water hole before they all killed over, before they all died. My, that first sip of water sure tasted good, even if I did have to wait my turn behind some Baldwin apples. So she gave water to all the plants before she drank. Oh, and I'm pleased to say our wagon and all the boots turned up too, all except one. I reckon that nasty wind blew my left boot clear to the other side of the moon. And if it should happen to drop out of the sky on your head one of these days, I'd sure appreciate you sending it along to me. Well, we kept on going, past Courthouse Rock and Chimney Rock and Independence Rock and lots of other rocks that didn't have names. We climbed up rocks and down rocks, and last we reached the Columbia River. Just 100 miles to go, declared Daddy. 100 miles. I told the kids in class today, 100 miles would be like if you ran around the soccer field behind the school 800 times. But time was running out. Our little trees had almost drowned in the river, got pounded by hailstones, and got withered by drought. How much more could they take? And now we were set for a showdown with the most honorary varmint of all, Jack Frost. Jack Frost is the cold, dew, wet stuff that you see on plants in the morning. They call it Jack Frost because it's what they call frost on the plants. It comes from the cold air in the night. Oh, I'd already spied him sneaking around our campsite, brushing the cottonwoods with his cold white tongue. That means she had already seen cold white frost on some of the plants in the morning. But I wasn't about to let him get close to my daddy's apples. So that night I made a big fire and sat by it, waiting for Jack Frost to show himself. Sure enough, as soon as the moon came up and I spotted that old good-for-nothing slinking across the meadow heading straight for the sweet Junes, I got ready to fight. Jack Frost came at me, turning the ground so cold my toes went numb. But I didn't give up. So it's getting cold out there, and she starts to feel the frost coming in. I grabbed a flaming stick and threw it right at him. So she took a stick from the fire and threw it at him. But before you could say Peter Piper picked a peck of pretty pippins, that low-down scoundrel was highlighting it out of there, heading straight for Walla Walla, Washington. So she's fighting with Jack Frost, which is actually just the cold air coming in, but she's trying to keep it from freezing the plants. So she throws a fire stick from the fire, and it warms up the area where it's cold next to the trees. I'm mighty grateful, Delicious, said Daddy as he scrutinized his sweeties the next morning. Thanks to you, even the sweets stayed snug. Okay, scrutinize means to check out something carefully. And he said to Delicious, thanks to you, even the sweets stayed snug. So they were warm and they didn't get cold or freeze or harm the plant. We were nice and cozy too, added Mama, checking on the children. Sure enough, all Daddy's trees survived, just as if they'd come across the plains on a swanky carriage. We floated them on boats down the mighty Columbia to a pretty place near Portland. Then we planted them in that sweet Oregon dirt at last. Gold was discovered in California not long after, and thousands of people rushed there to seek their fortunes. But not us. We already had our fortune. Those apples, peaches, pears, plums, grapes, and cherries made us richer than any prospector. We were happier too. After all, apples taste a whole lot better than gold. As for my daddy, he was always sweet as a peach. He and Mama lived happily to a ripe old age. Daddy never forgot my brave deeds on the trail. Why, as soon as he sold his first bushel of apples, He brought me the prettiest pair of boots you ever saw. Delicious, said Daddy. You'll always be the apple of my eye. All right. So tomorrow we'll talk more about the story and we'll do some work in the Your Turn practice. I hope you like the story. Bye-bye.